Rivers of Nihil with Monarchy, the band's second album. This is technical death metal. Yeah, a lot of riffs. Now this is a group that is relatively new, and if you are unaware of these guys, they are certainly a band to check out, especially if you are a fan of the tech death department. If you enjoy bands such as The Faceless and things like that, there is a good chance that you will find something appealing about this band, especially here on Monarchy on this album. This is a group that has some great riffing. It's one that, even though it's technical death metal, it's not overly technical. It's not as though that you're going to be seeing sweeps and different patterns consistently all over the place, and them being thrown at you at a high rate of speed just to sort of showcase the overall proficiency. This is actually a tech death band that uses pacing a little bit more to their advantage, and in some ways, in some shapes, and in some forms, they do have a little bit of a reminiscence to some of the Nihil death metal work that is, pure death metal, which is most of Nihil, but I think a lot of people just call them Egypt metal or whatever the fuck they call them because, Nihil. Rivers of Nihil, band Nihil, it's really not a coincidence that they have some similarities. However, with this tech death side that they really possess, it's one that really works to their advantage whenever it comes to songwriting, because this slower and not overly not overly technical side of this group is one that gives them the opportunity and the power to write a little bit more mid-tempo to the slower tempo stuff, and then really blind a lot of folks with the speed and the proficiency, the technicality. So it actually works to their advantage from a songwriting perspective, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more here in just a couple of minutes. But whenever you start this album with tracks such as Perpetual Growth Machine or Reign of Dreams, for example, right from the onset, you definitely see a little bit more of that faster pace, that little bit more of a mid-range ideology that this group has been able to really bring into being. And the one thing that I will say about this disc is that it's almost like a tale of two parts of the disc, where the first 7 songs, or really the first 6 songs, you're not going to see a track that's over 5 minutes in length, and these are songs that have a little bit more of a pace to them, that have a little bit more of a rapidity to them, and really take breaks only to showcase a little bit of soloing capability. And they have really tight songwriting on these tracks. Actually, on the entire disc, the songwriting is very tight and has a really good pinpoint on itself. So I think this is a group that's learning a lot more about what their sound is, and also doing the one thing that a lot of bands that don't make it can't do, and that's discovering in the process what their sound could potentially be. They're really discovering a lot more about themselves and about their band as they are recording these songs and fashioning new material. They're discovering new ways to make their formula, to make their breed of songwriting a little bit more interesting and give it a little bit more life. And the first half of this album really showcases that in very small, limited portions, but whenever it does, it's usually a songwriting trope that is kind of unique. It's kind of extraordinary. But then you get into the title track Monarchy all the way to the very final track Sun Told, and you don't have a track that is less than 5 minutes in length. In fact, you barely have a 2 songs that are under 6 minutes in length. So all of a sudden, this is an album that expands with its final 4 tracks to 2 tracks of modest length near 6 minutes, one that is 6.5, and then the final track, Sun Told, is 7.5. So you kind of go from having half of this album be really the first 6 songs, and then the last 4 really encompass the second half of the disc. So this off-balanced, off-proportional idea can kind of sometimes lead to some wonky results. In this case, we have the solid title track Monarchy that goes right into the second edition of the Terrestria series, which is entitled Thrive. The first one was featured on album number 1 as the very first track on that disc. And this is a great example of instrumental technical death metal. This is really what you want it to be all about, because this is a track that captivates you all the way throughout its near 6 minutes of length, and it really showcases that there are some tech death bands and some tech death songs that require no lyricism whatsoever, and they don't have to necessarily be those slower, more reflective songs. This is one where I feel that easily they could have probably thrown some lyrics in there and some singing in there, some vocals, some growls, whatever, but they didn't, and I feel that that's a bold step, and I have a feeling that this is a series that's going to be the exclusivity of it, almost like the Soulfly series, either that or, you know, sort of like the Overkill series, only those all obviously have vocals, where each selection in the series is going to, you know, have a similar vein than the one previous to it, but just a different construction and overall body. So these might forever be instrumentals. Who knows? Maybe the curveball in the next Rivers of Nihil album will be that it'll have vocals, but either way, then you get into Circles in the Sky and Sun Told, and both of these tracks are using that mid-pacing to even a little bit more of a slower tempo, at least at the start, in order to really try to simulate the idea of expanding the overall sound or the overall construction of the song, and then thrust back into the heavier riffing, the heavier pacing, and using that mid-tempo to slower tempo sort of as a nice little transition point, using that as a kind of a link to the fence, either that or a bridge to the gaps. And it's something that really fashions itself rather nicely. It's these are two tracks on the album that have a lot of character to them, they have a lot of movement and life to them, and Sun Told's ending couple of minutes may seem very, very light and, you know, almost as though you've been robbed of a couple of minutes of technical death metal, but it's actually a nice little ending to this disc after the previous 50 or so minutes of chaos. Overall, this is a really solid album. I feel that there's a lot of growth that was done between Monarchy and their first album, and this is really a great execution that shows that Rivers of Nihil, if they continue to sort of write along this pathway, to continue to discover more about themselves as they write, and more about their band as they write, are going to end up becoming a very, very solid band. One that's going to command the attention of many more people than they are right now. This might in fact be a bit of a breakout album for them, so definitely check it out. Give this album an 81 or an 82 out of 100. It really just depends on who you are. I'm personally going to just go with 81.5 and watch you guys yak about forever. That's actually an 82 because 5 or more rounds up, blah, 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 blah. Who cares? Great album, solid group of guys. I think that they have a lot to offer, but what do you think? What do you have to offer about this album, about Monarchy by Rivers of Nihil? Let me know in the comments below, and I will talk to you guys later. I'm CoverKillerNation, and I'm out of here.